Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Eight Principles Voices. I'm Larry Johnson, your host and the founder of the Eight Principles. Today, we're going to look at an organization that literally creates new lives for people and gives them different paths. And I have as my guest Anthony Kavanagh, who is the CEO, and he's coming at me all the way from Australia. Hello, Anthony. How are you?
G'day, Larry. I'm well, thanks. How are you going?
Just fine, thank you. Now, could you tell me a little bit? I know we talked before, but for our audience, could you tell me just a real quick summary of what Ganbina does?
Ganbina is a suite of programs that focuses on the transition of children through high school and into careers jobs. It's an employment program specifically targeted at Aboriginal kids in a regional community in Shepparton, Australia, which is about 2.5 hours north of Melbourne. And it focuses on their education and keeping these kids from disadvantaged families and the community in school and education.
So, how did you come to be involved with this?
I think it was pretty much my background in my life. I've been working in community services for 30 odd years. I grew up in a very sort of disadvantaged community and family and home a long time ago now, but I had an alcoholic father. I had a mother that later became a heroin addict and into drugs. And then as a young child, one day, my mother left my father. A couple of years later, as a 12-year-old, she walked out the door. And basically, the police turned up. They took away myself, my brother, and my sister. My sister a few years younger than us, and he was a year younger than me. And pretty much from then, we were separated for life, really, taken into government care. That led to a few years of homelessness for me, living in laneways and in the CBD in Melbourne, living in friends' couches, government care, in and out of that till I was a late teenager. And the one thing that stuck with me was school. I stayed at school, but of a night time I'd be sleeping in laneways with cardboard boxes. I'd be stealing fruit from the market and eating food, from bins and things like that, because I was just that hungry and destitute at that time in my life. Didn't know where my next meal was coming from. And I remember those times when I think about them, Larry, and I don't actually tell this story that often, probably counted on one hand, but just how cold it was. Not sort of sleeping with a roof over your head or blankets and those sort of things, especially in Melbourne's winter. But education became that mainstay for me at that time in my life. And by the time I'd got through to 22, met my wife, we had a couple of kids, and the government come knocking with an opportunity to work in childcare and in a boys' home, and helping guiding those boys that were disadvantaged into a better way of life. So it started then, and that was 36, 37 years ago. And fortunately, 10 years ago, I found myself, after building a career, being offered the CEO's role at Ganbina, and that's where I am today.
That's quite a story, Anthony. Quite a story. The thing that struck out to me about that, that education was the anchor. All right, you're obviously pretty bright. You were motivated there. So you just kept pushing and just kept pushing and just kept pushing. Um, that's, I wouldn't think that's too common, Anthony. You're pretty much self-motivated. Um, I mean,
Yeah, Larry, I think, we're never asked for what we're going to get most of the time, and when I was growing up, I never knew that other families operated differently. I
well,
thought that,
you didn't have
this
the
was my
experience.
lot, and this is what happens in every household type of thing, and what it really did was grounded me, and especially around parenting. my mother and father taught me one, probably the best life lesson I'll ever get, and that was how not to be.
Okay.
How not to love your children, how not to parent them. So I did completely the opposite. Loved my kids, ensured they were educated, worked, like a like a Trojan, just to ensure that financially they were able to have everything they needed. And was able to provide with my wife, provide that basis for them, and that's made a huge difference in their life. They're both married, they've got kids, they've got mortgages, they're in corporate jobs. So between the three of us, what we've done is we've broken a cycle in Australia,
Yes.
a cycle of generational disadvantage, welfare access by Aboriginal Australians that is, costing, billions of dollars, but just draining and taking away any hope
Mhm.
that these families and communities and kids have. And this is what Ganbina has been built on. So this is why I'm so passionate about Ganbina. It's actually got the right methodology, the right model, and funnily enough, 27 years of absolute success in ensuring that these kids grow up into adults. They graduate in year 12. 9 out of 10 kids are graduating year 12, the end of high school. They're choosing to go to university. They're choosing career jobs. They're not just accepting a job. And we're making a real difference, Larry. And it's all been banked by philanthropy support.
That's even more incredible that you chose that route. So when you go into a community and you identify these children, are they homeless? Do you provide them housing? Is it just education? How is it structured?
Yeah, so we're not the one-stop shop. There's a few things that we stay in our lane, and it's really around education and employment. So we don't offer services to, the kids that are in the juvenile justice system, to the ones that have got mental illness or housing, those sort of things. So our kids are accessing mainstream school. They choose to be with us. It's a voluntary program.
Okay.
So they walk through the door, or the families walk through the door, and year on year they do that repeatedly, because we have the program runs for 12 months at a time. But from a 5-year-old to a 25-year-old, that's 21. We're offering 21 years of continuous support, for each child. We offer financial support and a whole suite of programs to support their journeys.
That's pretty incredible. It's a voluntary program, which means you're getting kids that are motivated, number one. Um, and then it's sort of a whole package of education. So there's academics. Are there like life skills taught as well?
Absolutely, one of the key facets of the programs is that just day-to-day stuff. So the things from birth certificates to bank accounts to tax file numbers to everyday mentoring. So we don't have a mentoring program, but our staff liaise with those kids and families regularly. They go into schools, they sit with them, they talk to them about all sorts of things, and basically coach, life coach them for the
Mhm.
period of time that they're with us. And that creates a vacuum. It creates a vacuum of, their cousins and their brothers and sisters wanting to be involved, the families being advocates in community. And we get in between about 320 and 370 kids a year, Larry, and have been doing that for in the current suite of programs for about 17 years now. And we switched from the seed government funding in 2004. So since then, it's been all philanthropic and corporate money, and our budget's just sort of ticked over 2.3 million. So I have the pleasure of fundraising that money every year. The people that I meet that absolutely have faith in our work and our record. And the one thing you mentioned before is that we're starting to get that global reach. So there's a mentoring program in Canada that has been built on our base. There's philanthropy interest out of the US for us. So Paul Newman's own foundation and May and Stanley Smith out of San Francisco, I mean, those two have provided funding for us in the past. So American foundations can fund Ganbina. Um, I've met with Rockefeller Foundation a few years ago. So we're starting to grow a bit of a footprint in the US, and it's more about, it's not only about attracting funding, but it's about sharing the story, because there are disadvantaged communities around the world. I've heard people from India to Italy to Ireland to the US, New Zealand, Canada tell me that they're having similar struggles with their children and youth. They've lost hope. They don't know where to go. They don't know what the future looks like. So we believe we have a universal program, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about what that is and how it's set up.
You certainly had the success. I was thinking, a lot of the obstacles for these young people, these children even, is that they don't have the family guidance of teaching them how the world works. I mean, literally, it isn't just a matter of academics. I mean, that's part of it, but just understanding how the world works, how it's set up. For instance, as you said, how to manage a bank account, how to understand money, all these kinds of things that are life skills that if
Yeah.
you don't have them, you're really, really behind the curve.
Yeah, financial literacy, but you're absolutely right. Role models, and in some of our communities, some of these parents, and not having a crack at them, but some of them haven't had the experience. They haven't
Mhm.
completed high school. So, for example, one of my drivers is none of my aunties or uncles completed high school. They were all out at 13 and 14 years of age. So, and none of them could read and write and all those sort of things, which impacted on their ability to gain,
Oh,
good jobs or high paying jobs, and then spilled over to their lack of wealth building opportunities.
yeah, they perpetuate those attitudes and perpetuate the ignorance and the lack of skill, and I mean life skill, and so they're trapped, unless
Yep.
there's an intervention. Um,
Well, the role models, like you say, are real key. So somebody that's completed high school and gone to university, and we have an awards night in November, and we're having our kids stand up there and tell 250 people sitting down having dinner with us that they're the first in their family to complete high school, the first to go off to university, these sort of things. But fortunately for these kids, they're living the now, Larry. This is our time in life while we're here
mhm.
to influence this change. So their parents might not have had the opportunities that's been presented to them in fairness. So they're seizing those, they're
Yes.
raising their aspirations, they're living in hope.
Mhm.
And Ganbina is one of a multitude of organizations that is changing the future, changing the
Yes.
future for these kids.
So, tell me a little bit. Now, you've been in this. How long? How old is the organization?
1997, so 27 years old this year.
All right. So then, there's been sort of a generation of young people go through here. You have a number of alumni. Uh, are you involving them in any way in your ongoing work? Are they donors? Are they involved? How does that work?
Yeah. So the project itself was just a dream child of a couple of businessmen. A fellow by the name of Jim O'Connor, who's a non-Indigenous person, and Adrian Appo, and a few others. He's an Indigenous man, the founding CEO, but a few others back in '97. And what they put in place was a 2-generational 50-year pilot. And that's what we are. We're one generation in. We began the second generation a few years ago. So the kids of the first lot of kids that come through are now coming through. And they've been role models for their kids. But one of the key things of how we're set up is the sustainability. So we're there for the key transitions in each of these kids through their lives. So into 4 to 5 years of old age into primary school, 12, 13 into high school, and then mentoring all the way through to 25 years of age. And with the life skills and the connections that we've made for them, they're well equipped to do the rest. But one thing that needs to be, and you mentioned this before about them being driven, these kids and their parents, um, whilst when they're younger, they don't really know where they're going. They have some aspiration, and we encourage them to build on that. So if Billy wants to fly a rocket to the moon, and we know that that's unlikely, we're not talking him out of it.
No.
We're taking him on a journey to test how we get there. What do you have to do? And all that sort of thing. And we're encouraging. We're there every step of the way,
See,
and we're doing it in a consistent framework.
that is so smart because, as the boy matures, of course, going to the moon may morph into something else. It's part of the same path. And this is something that I've seen in this country. I guess you have it there too, that really annoys me. And that is when a child comes from a certain background, like a working class or lower background, they go into the school counselor and they deliberately sort of down, like, oh well, don't worry about it. You go over this way, this is for you, just screw nuts on, you'll be fine. Do you know what I'm speaking of?
Yeah,
It's sort of the
absolutely. So I was fortunate enough, and I'll say fortunate enough, most people would say unlucky. But in my homeless years, toward the back end of it, I found a place to stay where I had a room in a house, and the man that lived in that house and that, he used to regularly say to me that I would never amount to anything. He
okay.
used to reinforce, and he used to ram that home to me every time he got drunk. And he used to say that to me, and he used to qualify it by saying, "You've got no hope of being anything because of where you've come from, because of your environment, because of all these obstacles that were in his mind, his obstacles. They weren't mine. Mine were driven by, I'm going to say yes to everything, and I did. I've lived a life where I've had a go at everything. I've fallen over, I've failed, I've broken things, I've got up, I've gone again, and I encourage that of all kids. I say to them at the awards night in a short presentation, have a go. Say yes. It's okay to fail because you're better for the experience.
Oh yeah.
And most of the successful people in the world have failed over and over and over
Yes,
again, but they keep stepping up. All of those billionaires, you can ask them, you can talk to them, their stories. I've read books. Richard Branson is one that really drives home. Kerry Packer in Australia.
mm-hmm.
That those fellas, they failed a lot in the early stages, but they kept going.
Going. They kept going. With a landlord like you had, boy, I tell you, you had to turn a deaf ear to that. Just don't listen to what the man has to say. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. Wow, wow. So
If I didn't need to live there at the time, Larry, I wouldn't have.
you just said, sayonara, we'll see you later. So now you're primarily in what area of us? What your service area is in? What, South Central Australia?
Yeah, so Victoria, Melbourne, Victoria is sort of east, on the east coast at the bottom of Australia. It's one of the biggest states. You would have heard of Sydney a fair bit, but Melbourne is quite a large city, about 7 million people. Shepparton is about 2 hours north of Melbourne itself, has a population of 61,000, with the Aboriginal Indigenous population about 5,800, so about 9%. I'm also one of those Aboriginal fellas that knows their maths. So apparently, we're not supposed to know numbers, but numbers is my thing. So we're a large population. Australia itself is 3% Aboriginal people, but Shepparton itself is about that 9%. So there's a lot of disadvantaged. It's a regional community. It's a farming fruit community. You might have heard of SPC. They provide a lot of canned fruit throughout the world. But they're there. And it's a community that's been struck by a lot of tragedy. It's had floods twice over the last couple of years. Was significantly hit with the COVID lockdowns. But in general, it's a lovely community. People are trying to do their best. It's just limited through some of the infrastructure that's there. It just needs more. It's a large multicultural community as well. So the government over 20 odd years is building that up. So there's a lot of different cultures living there. And whilst there's a lot of opportunity, when you're a child or a young person, you don't sort of see that,
No.
visually. So it's, how do you build your aspirations of where you want to get to,
I
if you're not sure what the journey looks like?
do. Now, I remember reading about those floods a couple of years ago. They were pretty devastating uh, when that happened. Just wiped whole towns. The whole area just got really. So it was what it was from unusual a record amount of rain. Is that what caused it?
Yeah, absolutely. Fast rain, and it was hung around for about 10 days. But the flooding come from through the drains, so
Oh,
it didn't necessarily. It come out of the sky into the rivers. But the catchment, there's a large river on the edge of town, and the catchment, the water filled up, and there's a bridge that runs for about 4 kilometres, and that water's normally about 10 metres under the bridge. Well, it was about a foot. But when I went in at day 10 and crossed that bridge, the water was actually flowing up the river. Now, the interesting thing for that, the river itself is probably about 500 meters wide, but it runs for about 100 kilometers. So the water's gone all the way down there, got stopped and started to push back.
pushing.
And then that just pushed back up through the drains in the town and come up to just sort of ceiling height in people's houses.
Had nowhere to go.
Yeah, had literally nowhere to go and hung around for a couple of weeks.
Oh, I remember seeing the photographs of that, going, "Wow, wow, that was incredible." So, all right, you've got a great track record. You've done great things. You come from an incredible background. I mean, just you opening your mouth, you're an excellent salesman right there. You can make the case. Just boom. All right. So, where do you want to go from here? Both. I mean, I presume you're going to stay here for a while yourself. This is your mission. And so, where do you want to take the organization? What are your dreams for the future?
Yeah, so at the moment we're budgeting around about that $2 million, year on year. We've had some costing done, and to take the next step in our work, and extend that across Australia, it's going to cost in the vicinity of $90 million. So we're looking to take the organisation to that point. So obviously to fundraise that money, and that is a lot of money, especially
Yeah.
from philanthropic partners. And what we've done, we've put steps in place to do that. So we're having modelling redone at the moment, by one of our pro bono partners. We're about to go on a campaign. We're restructuring the organisation so I can have more chats like this, and to philanthropists, and to talk about the work we're trying to do, talk about how we get the results, how we're trying to reach tens of thousands of kids, not the couple of thousand that we've reached. But more recently, we've struck up a partnership with Global Impact. So Scotty Jackson out of Washington, DC, and they're helping us with corporate giving platforms across the US. We're talking to US philanthropists about the work that we're doing. We're talking to foundations, in India, in Ireland, in Italy, Canada, just different places. So and obviously Australia. So there's a lot of wealth around the world, but there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of interest in children, disadvantaged communities, youth, employment, creating economic prosperity, and that's our end game, Larry. And we need as many supporters, or people just to get interested in what we're doing. Give us a call, reach out to us, and when I was homeless and hungry and on the street, and at times, I was that hungry. So try and imagine that I begged for money. So begged for pocket change so I could buy food. The one thing that I've never done whilst I've been the CEO here is actually begged for donations or money. What I've done is I've shared a story. I've shared our plans and our aspirations with people, and they've decided to donate to the cause. So no more, Larry, am I begging for money. It's not what I do anymore. But what I do is I'm leading a great team that I have, an amazing board, to lead communities in Australia out of the mire that they're in a disadvantage, create economic futures for them that are a lot better than where they've come from. But also, I'm happy to share that with other communities around the world if they're interested.
You're not begging, you're inviting others to invest in the future of these young people. That's what you're asking them to do. And I think you've discovered this already, but there's more than enough money, Anthony. It isn't a matter of the money. It's a matter of finding the person and reaching out to them in a way that engages them and that you make them a part of that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Now your website is Ganbina.org.
.com. So
.com.
it's www.ganbina.com.au.
All right. So that would be GABINA .com.
You got me now. No, GANBINA. Ganbina.
It's a J. It's a G, isn't it?
Yeah, G for goat.
GAMBINA
.com.au.
All right. Okay. And that's how they can reach you. All right. Anything you'd like to add or a story you'd like to tell?
I think one of the things we've developed is a unique approach.
Yeah.
So, we'd be one of the few, not many, organisations that have chosen to go down a philanthropic corporate funding path.
Mm-hmm.
Most organisations would be receiving some portion or complete portion of government money. So at this point in the development of our journey and the development of our program, as a pilot, we're still co-designing a little bit of it. We know at some stage that as we grow this to reach thousands of kids, and not only in Australia, maybe across the world, we will need government support. So at some stage, there will be those conversations and invitations to have a chat, to break some bread, because we've all got to share the same vision for a better life for children. It's just that simple. We've got to share it. We've got to do something about it. We've got to put our hand in our pocket, and we've got to enable people like me, people like my staff, people like my board, people like Ganbina to do their work. And let's be straight about it. The financial support is one of the key aspects. Believing and having faith and trust in us to do our job, but giving us financial capacity to do that and do that well.
All right. Okay. Wow, this has been terrific. I've enjoyed this very much. We'll do this again, I think. There's more I want to, and I know you have a new board chair who's also Indigenous, Aboriginal, and I'd like to speak with him at some point. Because that's the other thing I like about your organization. When I first looked at it, you're bringing these people in leadership positions themselves. You're growing from the inside out, which is the way to do it. And by focusing on philanthropy, you achieve the most flexible, renewable money. You see, it's far more flexible, far more renewable, and you don't have to fill out as many forms, Anthony.
Well, philanthropy, they're not on 3 or 4 year, government rotations. People shifting through. So families are families. So the relationships tend to be a lot longer, in that sort of 5-10 year investment cycles, maybe, even longer. We've had a couple of our funders longer than that. But yeah, it's a different sort of world. But that doesn't mean governments around the world, and at least in Australia, have a responsibility to be involved with programs like this and to fund and spend taxpayers' money, not only on trusted organisations, but organisations that can prove that they are having the desired impact and making a real difference. So not only someone like myself at the front of it trumpeting how great we are and what we do and how it's important, but being able to prove it, Larry, is a different kettle of fish. But we've been doing this for 25, 27 years. We didn't come to the party last week. This wasn't an idea somebody had a couple of years ago. We've been doing this for a long time, and I think with respect, I think we've earned the opportunity
I
to
know,
be supported.
I know you have. Your story alone is a testament for that. Um, that's incredible, Anthony. I want to thank you for taking your time. And I'll do this again. Thank you.
It's the least I can do, and I really appreciate our connection, Larry, and thank you so much for your interest. And I'm sure Fallon Wanganeen, our chair, would be happy to be hosted by yourself into the future. He's a lovely chap making his way in the world as well, and has a great story to tell. So, thank you for your time, your interest, and hopefully your viewers
All right.
see a bit of something in the story.
Well, everyone, I've had a delightful conversation with Anthony Kavanagh, who's the CEO of Ganbina, and we're going to hear more from you, Anthony, and I know that our audience will enjoy it as well. So very soon there'll be another episode of A Principal's Voices, but until then, enjoy.